What's up, guys? Today's video would just be a little bit about a story of having to approach and address an issue today. I help manage a team in a remote facility in addition to the facility that I run. At that facility, we also basically manufacturing facility, and unfortunately, I've had some conflicts with that team. In particular, this week, there was some reports. Ultimately, they weren't being fully honest about our projected outcomes for the week, about what we were expecting to do. We're trying to implement a new process. We have a daily meeting to discuss exactly what we're going to get for the week. We communicate our plan once a week, and we follow up on that every day. Ultimately, the plan that was communicated, we knew we were not going to hit, and by we, I mean they. And in recent meetings, the past week or so, any of the questions that I've asked have been met with combativeness and just pure defensiveness. This is a challenge that sometimes raises itself up, a communication challenge. I thought it was definitely worth discussing. So addressing and approaching this issue is something that a couple years back that I would really struggle with. One, especially being remote, it's something that I've had to kind of address pretty aggressively in the past couple months in order to be able to better facilitate my support and better help this team accomplish its goals. One of the first key points that I would kind of highlight is that I generally use questions to help pull out the information that I need to help support them. Information is how we make decisions, and ultimately communication is about the transfer of information from one to the other, right? Sometimes one party is less willing than the other, or there is friction in the lines of communication that prevent it from going as well as it really needs to, or as well it should. Communication is a common problem in all sorts of relationships, and especially organizations. A lot of times you will hear, if you start to ask people, hey, what's the problem? Well, we're just not communicating well enough. We need to communicate more. Our communication is really bad, or it sucks, right? These are really common things, but friction exists for some reason or another, and situations like this definitely come up. So today, I had a meeting in which I took some of that time to address this issue, and I kind of addressed it head on. I described my perspective as the very first thing that I did. So I approached the subject and said, hey, this is how I see it. I feel like we're on opposite sides of the table. You guys are receiving my feedback really poorly, taking it really negatively, and ultimately, I know that we've been miscommunicating our production plan for this month, for this week. It was direct, it was simple, it was to the point. I'll tell you, it's not comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's breaching a subject of discomfort, as simply as I can state it. I'm not sure if there's a more complicated way or a more descriptive way. It is uncomfortable, but it's something that needs to happen. You see, these issues that come up in life, they need to be addressed, because if they're not, they don't just go away. You might ignore them, but oftentimes they just won't handle themselves. This situation would likely get worse, and twofold. One, I don't want to be in this situation, and two, it's my responsibility. So approached the issue, addressed it, said, opened the topic, and I gave specific evidence from this week, exactly kind of why I think the way that I think. And lastly, the biggest thing that I tried to do is establish common ground. I think it's even presented in How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's something that we generally overlook. Oftentimes we're so focused on our argument, or potentially deconstructing their argument, taking apart their argument, that we don't focus on the common ground. I think people are really bad at it. I've been really bad at it. I've been trying to be a lot better at it. And I try to present common ground so that way we can have a basis for moving forward. This is in all kinds of conversations that have some tension to them. I highly recommend it. These were the 3 key steps that I was really going for. And while I took a little bit of time to prepare for it today, this is one in which I just jumped in. I needed to trust that I was going to be able to come out the other side, and trust that no matter the reactions, we'd be able to work through it. Fortunately, that was the case. So in the conversation, after the initial part, I then went and did kind of 3 new things, right? Let me see. I forgot the first one. I get that. So in establishing that common ground, I then tried to move us down a path. And this was, at this point, it's not alone, right? Once you find common ground, you're working together a bit as a team to get back on the same page. So this is what we're trying to do. This is our goal. This is how I see it. And then really let them talk for a long time, listening to what it is that they had, and ultimately finding that I could probably give some perspective. And the way that I was able to give perspective is in clarifying the expectations. We have limited resources. This is a very common thing in all sorts of environments. And what's up to us is how we choose to spend those resources. We have dozens of priorities, but if you have dozens of priorities, nothing's a priority. So in order, I was able to help reprioritize and kind of give them my perspective on how I would focus on things. Some priorities aren't going to get much energy, if at all, but they're lower priority. So we clarified those expectations and how I would do what they're asked to do. And also clarify that I'm on their team and I'm here to support them. So when I'm asking questions and seeking that information, it's to provide confidence in the plan. And it's really information that they should know. And if they don't, that's a problem. It's not to call them out. It's to ensure that we're doing the right things and taking the right actions. Clarifying that expectation, clarifying my point of view and where I'm coming from is very helpful. It won't always be received. Again, that's kind of goes back to the last couple of days discussing the currency of communication, trust and respect. Fortunately, I built that in this team, so I can leverage that and utilize that currency. Lastly, it's controlling expectations. So moving forward, you're going to have a follow-up meeting in about 2 weeks, but I have to watch for what we discussed. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to go about it. Here's how I see spending your resources the most wisely, and here's the information you guys should know in the future. That way they can win. Really, I'm giving them all the information that they need to put into practice, into their daily actions in order to be successful, the way that I see it. This will allow us to attack priorities in the right way, which I think prioritization is thinking of it kind of like overflowing buckets, right? You fill up the first bucket, then starts to fill up the second bucket, fills up the third bucket. What we've been doing is trying to pour water in all the buckets, which leaves very little to no water in each bucket, and nothing changes. We make no progress. So we need to change our methodology a little bit, try something a little bit different. It may not be successful, it may fail, and that's okay, as long as we're taking different actions. Ultimately, a couple of the key points I would say, it's not comfortable, but it's necessary. You assuredly have conversations in your life that probably won't be comfortable to approach them or to have them, but they're necessary because you value the relationship and you value what it means. Additionally, just braving that discomfort, stating my perspective, and then being a good listener to be able to respond and provide hopefully some insight and value that will help them be more successful as we move forward. Ultimately, I think it was a success, but only really the next couple weeks will tell. Follow-up meeting in a couple weeks. Hopefully there's nothing negative to report. And hopefully there's some takeaways in that lesson that provide you with some value. You can't lose if you don't quit.